to our performance. Before I tell you a little bit about our next piece, Maestro Becker and I would like to take a moment to recognize our 36 graduating seniors in the orchestra. Through their great contributions as students, musicians, and friends, the seniors have helped the orchestra grow tremendously, and they will be sorely missed. Would all graduating seniors on the stage and in the audience please stand and receive our warm appreciation. Rimsky Korsakov's Scheherazade is one of the greatest orchestral works of all time, and it is our pleasure to perform it for you tonight. Nikolai Andreevich Rimsky-Korsakov was born in a little town outside of St. Petersburg in 1844. He eventually studied composition with Mily Balakirev, who was an incredible influence on Rimsky-Korsakov's composition style. Nikolai progressed with his music and soon became one of the 5 great composers of the Russian School of Music. Scheherazade was completed in 1888 and first premiered later that year. It is Rimsky-Korsakov's best known and most performed work. Scheherazade is actually based on the Arabic stories, 1001 Arabian Nights. The legend of Scheherazade is that of a brave, strong, and intelligent young woman who set out to save her fellow women from the wrath of King Shahryar. One night, the king came home to discover his wife with another man, who was one of his own slaves. The king was so outraged that he murdered his wife by throwing her out a window of the tallest tower in his palace. Then he decided that he couldn't trust any woman in his kingdom. So every night he would marry a new innocent woman, have his way with her, and have her killed in the morning. This continued for some time before Scheherazade, the king's vizier's daughter, decided to do something about it. She insisted to her father that he give her to the king that very night. After much deliberation, the vizier consented and gave his daughter to the king to be married and then presumably killed in the morning. However, Scheherazade had been educated and was incredibly clever. Before they fell asleep for the night, Scheherazade talked the king into letting her sister stay with them for the night. The sister begged Scheherazade to tell them a story before they fell asleep. So Scheherazade told the king a captivating story, but stopped just short of the ending. The king was so curious to hear the rest of the story that he kept her alive for one more night to have Scheherazade tell the end. And so the next night, Scheherazade continued telling stories of love, betrayal, and the adventures of kings and princes. There were magical stories within stories that kept the king burning with curiosity for 1001 nights until he finally fell in love with Scheherazade and they lived happily for the rest of their lives. Through Scheherazade's courage, the women of the kingdom were saved and the king's rage subsided into love. The 1001 stories told by Scheherazade are a collection of tall tales from Persia, Arabia, China, India, and several more Middle Eastern and Asian nations. Over time, the stories were translated from the ancient scripts they were taken from and adapted to fit everyday Arabic life. If you'd like to read all the stories, they're available in the Lawrence Library for some light reading. That is, if you consider an 8-volume work light reading. I personally only read up to Night 200, and even that was a lot to read. And although Scheherazade's personal story is a little risque, some of the stories that she tells would definitely be rated R. I wouldn't recommend reading them to your kids as bedtime stories. The piece itself is a tone poem, which means that it was meant to convey an image or a story with the music. Scheherazade is full of imagery. Each movement is a different story told by Scheherazade, and they're all very unique. Rimsky-Korsakov titled the movements the Sea and Sinbad Ship, the Calendar Prince, the Young Prince and Young Princess, and the Festival at Baghdad to match the programmatic nature of the piece. The first movement begins with the king's theme, stated by the brass and heavy bass sounds in the orchestra. It is loud and angry, just like the king was when he discovered his wife with another man. It is followed by Scheherazade's sensuous and seductive theme in the solo violin. She calms the king's rage temporarily with her soaring melody and begins her first tale of the sea in Sinbad's ship. Imagine yourself on a vessel of the sea, sailing on a lazy day. The entire movement moves in a rocking motion to depict waves on the ocean. Sinbad and his crew travel through a squall over the sea as the music rises and falls and crashes over the ship of Scheherazade's first magnificent tale. As the king's theme gradually ascends and builds tension, imagine the furious king demanding entertainment from Scheherazade, lest she lose her life the next morning. Our heroine continues to weave her story around the king as the waves die down and Sinbad and his crew are transported safely across the water. The movement fades away as the ship sails into the far distance with calm seas and a prosperous voyage. The second movement begins with Scheherazade singing her motive again, as her life was spared the night before. Her tale for the second night is of the calendar prince, who was a nobleman disguised as a wandering beggar. The vagabonds he associated himself with were jesters and tricksters of sorts. They would perform small tricks or beat traitors in battles of wits in exchange for a few coins or a night's lodging. The prince's theme is first stated by the bassoon and is passed around the orchestra as he and the beggars perform their tricks. The music then becomes much busier, and the prince and his fellow wanderers travel through a crowded Middle Eastern bazaar. A movement of tension arrives as the prince evades discovery in his guise time and time again. He returns to the business of the market and is eventually revealed as a prince at the end of the movement in a whirlwind of sound and harmony. The third movement is a passionate love story between the young prince and young princess. The melodic lines presented here are some of the most beautiful ever written and are dripping with emotion. The quick clarinet solo adds the Middle Eastern flavor to the music as the young couple walks in absolute rapture with each other. They are briefly interrupted by the musings of a court jester, or perhaps a small musical troupe moving through the area. However, nothing can separate these two. It is a truly magical scene as the passion always comes back to them and they share a kiss or two away from the crowd. Scheherazade speaks at the end of the movement, weaving her words around the king again, consuming him in curiosity to hear the rest of the story. The last movement portrays another busy scene as a festival is taking place in Baghdad. King Shahryar makes a statement first, angrily demanding entertainment from Scheherazade. She pleads with him to stay calm as both themes are stated twice before she jumps into her last story. The story shifts back to Sinbad and his ship on the sea as the grand fanfare is announced again by the brass. The music rises and falls as the ocean of Scheherazade's story grows more and more violent. Listen for the howling winds and the crashing waves of the sea, and the creaking and groaning of the ship as its fortitude is tested. The climax occurs when the ship is dashed into pieces on a rock with a bronze soldier mounted at the top. When the storm dies down, Scheherazade gets the last word, as the king's once angry theme is transformed into one of beauty and peace. The king finally learns to trust her and revokes his bloody vow altogether. I hope that Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade evokes as much imagery in you as it does for me. Let your imagination roam free in the fantastic fairy tale that is Scheherazade, and let Rimsky-Korsakov's music transport you to a land far away and into the exotic. This piece allows for an escape from our everyday lives here, and lets us be adventurous sailors, kings, queens, princesses, and princes just for a little while. Thank you again for spending your Saturday evening with the Lawrence Symphony Orchestra, and I hope you enjoy the last concert.